Hi there, welcome to Heart Explained Therapy, and I'm going to try and explain something that I've been avoiding for too long, and it's ego. The reason I avoid it is because I don't understand it, and everybody says it all the time, and it's really annoying because they're saying something that nobody knows what it is. I've tried to find some of the best, most intellectual people, everyone's saying something different, so the ego means something different to them. And Eckhart Tolle, one of my favourite sort of spiritual people who has just got this sort of psychology of in the moment and being now, says feed the spirit, not the ego. Now for me, my personal understanding of the ego is that the spirit is the ego. The spirit can only be found through the transportation of the vehicle, which is the ego. So therefore it's a place that exists and coexists with the spirit, and the spirit that you feed and you project outwards into a spirituality or a ideology does everything that an ego does. It creates illusions that make you feel comfortable. That's the ego. Now unfortunately the ego usually does bad illusions, and the only difference is the spirit does good illusions, which makes it more, as if that's more right, but I don't think this is true. I think there's still something that connects and binds the two, which is my idea of the ego has to be the mind. It has to be your mind, because your mind has the capability of choosing what to do, and high up on that list is your survival, the vessel that you're in. You can talk about spirits and souls, and you can get lost in this sort of language, but you have to function, you have to eat a certain amount of food, otherwise your vessel, you will die. You have to get out of bed and be productive, proactive. Even the most least productive people are still functioning at some sort of level, and I think they need the ego to do this. Now I think that I turn back to my usual philosophy, where if you break and dissect everything down, let's look at the surface level, the conscious awareness level of the average human being, and we could see that the ego exists with arrogant behaviour, cockiness, the big-headed show-off. We can see that more of the population of humanity has this ego as a strong sort of dominating figure over the spirit or the soul, or whatever language you want to put onto it, and they take lots of selfies every day and pictures of their dinner, and they only really care for themselves. And you can say this is an egoic mind taking over and taking the actions of this person. And so the ego looks for survival, it looks for sort of existence, and it looks for a significant role to play in your life, because it fears if you let it go and you disregard it, that not only will the ego as a separate thing from you disappear and die, and it will no longer be there, it also probably thinks that you will die with it. And we talk about this through a conscious sort of awakening, and this is definitely a process that you see. You can come out and see the ego as a different part of you. But the one thing that I wrestle with is nothing really changes apart from your morals and values. With the ego under control, you can be more thoughtful, and what seems less vain, but in a way, if you look and dissect it even more, you'll see that you've mastered the art of the ego, as in like control of it. You have put that on a leash rather than it having you on a leash, and you can actually then say, I do all these great things, I master my words and emotions, I know exactly how to carry out my actions in public, see that the ego is still dictating this behaviour. The ego is still in control. It's almost like for every veil of the ego that you take down, it will just sort of change and morph itself into a new sort of almost stealth-like new figure that you no longer believe in or believe is there, but behind the curtains it's still playing its part. So what is the ego? Is it even a thing? Is it real? Or is this just your mind? Your mind has the capability of being arrogant and feeding the ego, what Eckhart Tolle would say, or your mind has the possibility to be nice and feed the spirit. And you see that nothing changes from the mind. The perspectives change, but not the ego or the spirit. They just arise through being fed. So it takes me to this point of beyond the mind. When is the part where the ego is no longer there? Now let's go to the dream world where you fall asleep. You can't possibly have an ego in your dream. However, unconsciously, you're dreaming of events that are showing you and painting you a picture, and it's like, once again, your mind is still switched on with these different realms of images that are projected in a mental construct now, not the reality as you know it. And it seems that even unconscious dreamlike behaviour has an egoic sort of play. So no matter which way we attack the ego, it seems to be always ever present, and it seems to be playing a very important part. It makes you exist in a sense, because the spiritual guru would not get anywhere without the ego, and the ego certainly would not want anything of the experience written down. But this is what spirituality is, it's an ideology written down. Could that not be made by spirit alone? And that's just not ego, it's just pure wanting to share the wisdom. I would just disagree from my own personal experience. But we need to understand why an egoic mind is bad and what's the difference. An egoic mind is different when you don't listen to people. You already have something that you want to say in your head and you're waiting for the person to stop. That's an egoic human trait that is selfish and only feeds your purpose. Now unfortunately, why this is bad, you can say, well, it's not bad for the person because they're enjoying the conversation, because it's all about them. And when something is all about one singular person, this is a breakdown of relationships. This is a breakdown of your health and your mental well-being. This is the long-term selfishness with the projection of ego, is you being on your own for a long amount of time, whether you've polarised one part of the ego or the other. Even in spirituality now, you see that spirituality takes away everything that it doesn't like, and they segregate in small groups of about 20 or 30 as some sort of tribe. And you're telling me that's not the perfect thing that an ego would do? The perfect thing that an ego would do is trigger a DMT psychedelic emotional feeling for you, to feel like you would think and feel that it's gone and it's vanished. And for me, in a way, this shows that the ego doesn't actually truly exist. It exists as an idea in the mind, and we all say it and we make it real. And is there anything real about that? Truly dissecting it down, is there any truth in anything that we ever say? Now, how do you this is important. There's an ego that's bad for you and there's an ego that's good for you. There's an ego that's selfish and there's an ego that's not selfish, and it's very quite, loving. But there's got to be a sort of rule of thumb that you approach the idea of the experience or the existence of an ego with. And this is by breaking down what behaviours are you carrying out that basically make life uncomfortable for either you or somebody else. When you have somebody who says something that you don't quite get, and you even don't believe in it because your ego is that powerful it will blind you, have a look and ask yourself why you're not agreeable to that idea. And if you can break down that first layer of ego, you will see that there's actually a lot of truth in that individual's words or behaviours and actions that this ego was putting up a defence to. And we all know the terminology of an ego defence, and it's very true that you don't want to look stupid, you don't want to sound stupid, you want to always come across as the most intellectual, intelligent person, the funniest, and all these great traits. And if you can sacrifice any of those traits and you don't want to be that, which is a mental health in its own right, you will polarise to silence, and that's where you would get your attention. Or you will polarise to self-harming, and that's where you get your attention. And this is a mental health as well. So again, we're stuck in a place where it's complete and utter illusion. And this isn't actually uncomfortable. It's only uncomfortable for truth seekers, for people who have to watch a video and understand something very bluntly and fairly. When you don't understand something, break it down. Tell me what the ego is to you as a personal experience, and when does it come into play? Why does it come into play? You will see that most of the time it's actually all of the reasons are for your benefit, but probably for leading towards a selfish side of benefit. But when you polarise and project the opposite way, you do the same thing. I don't understand truly the workings of the ego. For me, it doesn't have to be as toxic as you think. It seems to be a great platform to start on and a bridge to go to somewhere else. I believe that we need it, and I believe we can tame it and handle it. And in that crazy illusion, sometimes in deep letting go of all what I connect to with my mind, just like mental health, just like most of the realities I see in the world, it doesn't exist. And everyone talks about it, and it's labelled in a sentence. And the most intellectual minds on the planet are just not summing this up. They're breaking it and separating it as in spirit and ego are two different things. And they are not. They are basically another point on a cobweb that you're trying to break off and separate. And you can't. Spirit doesn't exist without ego. And ego doesn't exist without spirit. And soul doesn't exist without that platform and construct. And consciousness doesn't exist without that. And so on and so forth. And I probably haven't even nailed this video. And it's the first time I've ever spoke about it. I haven't done any notes. So it's probably just gobbledygook. But that is my understanding of the ego so far. And it's very tough. And I can't really get to grips with it, so I apologise for wasting 15 minutes of your time.